Good afternoon and welcome to the webinar Getting the Best Out of ShareScope Gold. My name is Richard Chiesa and I'm the Support Manager here at ShareScope. I would like to begin the webinar talking about the navigation program, how to get around the program. What you see in front of you is the basic setup of ShareScope that you will see when you install the program for the first time. My guess is that your ShareScope is probably different from this, especially if you've been using it for a while. But this is a setup I'll be using to explain the concepts we'll be going through today. So the two very important things to learn in ShareScope are the two keys to use. The first key is the Enter key. The Enter key will allow you to change the screen that you're on. If I select Megit PLC, I hit the Enter key once, I'll look at the graph. If I hit the Enter key a second time, I'll look at the financial details for the company. If I hit the Enter key on my keyboard a third time, it will return me back to the full list. The second button to remember is the spacebar key. If we go to a chart, I can hit the spacebar to move down to the next share in the list. And this works also if you're in the details page or if you're in the list itself. Holding down the Shift key and pressing the spacebar goes up the list. In front of you is a list of FTSE 250 stocks, but you can change the list you're viewing by using one of the buttons at the top. If you click on FTSE 100, the program will open up a list of FTSE 100 stocks, and you can click on LSE shares or US shares to view a list of all of the London Stock Exchange shares or all of the US shares. We have a list of indices and a list of economic data. Economic data will include things like consumer price index, gross domestic product, house prices, and etc. If these buttons here at the top are not the only lists that you can view in the program, if you go to change list, you will be able to see the full list of all the lists that we cover. So if you go to UK LSE lists, you'll find the FTSE 100, 250, 350, all share, the AIM list, etc. Under indices, you can find major global indices, FTSE 350 sector indices, etc. Under ETFs, funds and bonds, you'll find various lists of ETFs, investment trusts, funds, etc. And under US, you'll find all the US lists, and in Europe, excluding the UK, you'll find all the various European lists. And then we have commodities, foreign exchange, economic data, etc. Now, of course, you don't need to keep on hitting the spacebar in order to look for a share. If we're on a chart and I'm in Diageo, I don't need to keep on hitting the spacebar until I find Vodafone. I can simply do a search. To do a search, you simply start typing on your keyboard. So if I hit one of the letter keys, a search box will open up and I can type in VOD and the program will find Vodafone. I hit enter or click on OK and I'm going to see Vodafone on the screen. Now when you're searching, you can search for the name, so I can type in for example and it'll find HSBC Holdings, or I can type in the EPIC or ticker code of a company, GSK, and it's going to find Glaxo. I can also type in the CDOR code or ISIN code of the share. So if I type in GB0006, etc., it will find all of the shares that have that ISIN code. Now, searching by ISIN code is not particularly useful when you're searching for shares, but it does become extremely useful if you're searching for funds, as often the way that the name that is used to define a particular fund can differ if you're looking at the fund manager's website, at your stockbroker's website, or at ShareScope, and there's some slight differences, some abbreviations that are used or not used. So if in doubt and you're not too sure if you've picked the correct fund in the list, use the ISIN code, and that's a way to be guaranteed that you'll find the correct instrument every time. Now, When you're searching, you'll notice at the top it'll say list FTSE 100. That means that whatever I search for will be searched for within the FTSE 100 list. So if I'm looking for example, IMI, I'm not going to get any results because IMI is not in the FTSE 100 list. In order to find IMI, I just go to a list of LSE shares, and now IMI will appear because it will search for IMI within the entire London Stock Exchange universe. Click on OK, and IMI will appear on the list. And so I can use Enter to view the graph, look at the financial details, and then again back to the list. If you're not sure what list a particular instrument is in, we do have a list here called All. The All list is just one huge giant list containing everything that exists within the ShareScope universe. All shares, all funds, all ETFs, all indices, all foreign exchange, all in one giant list. So click on All, and you're going to find you'll be able to find what you're looking for in there. Now, the next thing I wanted to talk about are the settings. Settings are these buttons that you see here below the chart. You'll see a button here called Main View, Fundamentals, Momentum, Heat Map. Your buttons might be called something different because you can freely rename any of these settings, so they might be different from the way I see them here. Settings are just different ways of displaying the same list. So let's go back to the list of FTSE 100 shares. I'm currently looking at the FTSE 100 list in the main view. Now, the main view is what determines the way that this list is displayed. It will determine things like anything from the font used, background color, which columns are being used to display, what columns of information are being displayed. If I click on Fundamentals, I'm still looking at the same list of shares. I'm still looking at a list of FTSE 100 shares, but the display has changed. I'm now showing different information. I'm showing more fundamental information, EBIT, P ratios, etc. Momentum is another table. It is, again, same with FTSE, still the FTSE 100 list of shares, but with a whole bunch of columns showing you the percentage change over a week, a month, 3 months, etc. And you'll find several different ones here, and also some completely blank ones, which you will be free to edit and modify in any way you please. There'll be 7 buttons here at the bottom. If you're using ShareScope Gold, click on the menu here at the top, and you should have access to all 12 tables that you can set up. Similarly, graphs work the same. So currently I'm looking at a graph of Vodafone, and I am using, if you look at the bottom, I'm using setting 1 for Vodafone. If I click on setting 2, I'm still looking at a graph of Vodafone, but set up differently. While setting 1 was displaying a bar chart, daily bar chart displayed over a year with a moving average and a volume bar at the bottom, setting 2 is showing me data going back to 1994, 2 moving averages, and then the volume below. Setting 3 is a candlestick chart. Setting 4 is again as a candlestick chart, but over a longer period of time, and with some indicators below. Now remember, when you make changes to a chart, you're not making changes to the chart of Vodafone. So if I were to add an extra moving average, I wouldn't be adding an extra moving average to the Vodafone. I'd be adding an extra moving average to setting 1. So any share I view using setting 1 will see then this extra moving average. And exactly like with the lists and with the graphs, the detail screens also have their own settings. The program comes preloaded with a bunch of different ways of displaying financial data. And again, just like with the graphs and the tables, you're free to modify them or keep the defaults if you're happy with them. We'll have, for example, there's a portrait mode which is set up to be printed then on an A4 sheet of paper, and then a landscape mode, and it's still, again, just like with a graph or with a list, I'm still looking at the same thing. I'm still looking at financial data for Vodafone, but just displayed in a different manner. Now, I want to get back to lists. You'll be probably spending a lot of time looking at lists because they're the easiest way of viewing and analyzing a whole bunch of instruments all in one go. You will notice that the list is not sorted alphabetically. In fact, it is sorted by market capitalization. You can see that because the market cap column is in bold text and has a little black arrow here to remind you that that's the column being used. It doesn't have to be that way. You can use any column in a table to sort the list by that column. So if I do want it in alphabetical order, I just point my mouse arrow at the name column heading, double click, and the list will be sorted alphabetically. If I double click again, it will be sorted in the inverse order. And if I just double click on any column, the list will be sorted by the column I chose. If I double click here, it puts it back in market cap order. Now, as I said, these tables here that you see, these are just examples of things that we think you might be interested in, but you are obviously free to modify them in any way you want. So let's start off by adding columns. Add a column is very easy. You point your mouse arrow at the column heading area here at the top, so the grey bar. You right click and all the add column options will appear. We have add general column for generic information, things like sector column, company website, ISIN code, etc. Add price column, here you'll find all option related to the share price. So if you want to add a column that gives you the percentage change over the last year, you're going to find it here. Add results column, this is where you find the financial information. So you click on add a results column, dialog box opens up, and you will find all the financial details here. Add rank column will allow you to show the financial details still not as a absolute numerical value, so 100 million, 2 billion pounds turnover, but it will show you how the share ranks. So it's going to be 27th out of however many measured by turnover, for example. Date column will allow you to add columns with pertaining interesting dates, so dividend dates or pay dates or AGM dates, etc. Fund column, investment trust column, gilt and corporate bond column will add columns with information that is unique for funds, investment trusts, or gilts and corporate bonds respectively. And add transaction column will allow you to add columns pertaining transactions that you've made in the share, so purchase or sales. And we'll get back to this when we talk about portfolios in a moment. But let's have a look at this in a little bit more detail. Let's add a column that will show us the percentage change in price over the last year. So we go to add price column, and you'll see an option that says price change since. And here, dialog box will open up and it'll give me my option to choose. So I can choose to show the percentage change between now and a specific date in the past, or a specific number of calendar days ago, trading days ago, weeks ago, months ago, or years ago. So if I select years ago, put 1, it's going to look at the change between the most recent close price and the close price 1 year before that, and it will be a rolling year. So in 6 months' time, it will be looking at the close price in 6 months' time compared to the close price 1 year prior to that. And you can display the change in 3 ways. You can display it as an absolute value, so pence or cents, as a percentage, or as an annualized percentage growth. If we select percent and click on OK, here is our price percent 1 year ago, and we can easily see that HSBC Holdings, for example, has dropped by 18.11% in price compared to 1 year ago. And just like any other column, I double click to see who has been the year's best performer, and I can see Ocado has gone up by over 100% over the last year, and double click again and I can see that British American Tobacco has lost over 50% or almost 50% of its value over the last year. If you want to add fundamental data, for financial data, as I said, it's add a result column. I'll show you a couple of examples here to give you an idea of how this works. Say, for example, I want to check how much the turnover of a company is forecast to grow over the next year. So I'll press the add a results column. I'll find turnover under the headline results, so I select turnover. Period, I want the year end turnover, and the year, what I'm going to do is I'm going to select the 1 year forecast, but I won't be displaying, I don't want to display the 1 year forecast. I don't want to know what the turnover will be in millions or billions of pounds. I want to see how much the turnover is forecast to grow compared to the turnover of the previous year. So what I do, I select calculated, I select growth percentage over 1 year. So this is going to take the forecast turnover of a 1 year forecast turnover and compare it with the most recently reported turnover, so 1 year before. I click on OK, and here it is. I can see, for example, that Micro Focus International is forecast to grow its turnover by 184%, while Vodafone is forecast to drop its turnover by about 3.2%. Now, columns can be moved and removed. So if you want to move a column, you click, you drag left or right, and you let go to drop the column where you want it. Click, drag, and let go. If you want to get rid of a column, you right click on it and you will see a remove column option. Right click, remove column, and that will get rid of it. Now, I'm going to show you two extremely neat things that you can do with lists. First is new highs and new lows. Now, if you look on the toolbar at the top, again, if you still have the default settings, you should have a button that says new highs and new lows. If you press it, the list will be limited to only shares within that list that have just hit a new high. So now, out of a FTSE 100 list, there's only one share that's just hit its 1 year high, so it's new 1 year high. And if I change the list and change this to FTSE 350, for example, the option will become will still be available. Will still be active. So it's still showing me only the new highs within the FTSE 350. If I hit new lows, it will now show me just the new lows within the list that I have selected. And if I press it again, it will return back to the full list. So again, this is the FTSE 350 list. If you don't have these buttons here at the top, there's a shortcut key for it, and that's the tab key. So to the left of the letter Q on your keyboard, you have the tab key. Hit it once. First time, it will actually pop up a warning to make sure to tell you exactly what's happening now that you've pressed the tab key, but just don't show again. Click on yes and it will disappear. So you hit the tab key the first time, it will limit the list to new highs. Hit the tab key a second time, it will limit the list to new lows. Hit the tab key a third time and you're back to the full list. If you wish to change the period over which this is the ShareScope looks for new highs and new lows, you can do that fairly easily. As I said, the program will come when you load the program first time, it will be set to 1 year. But if you right click on anywhere in the middle of the list, you'll see an option that says new highs, lows. There'll be an option here, highs and lows settings global. Click on it and you can set over what period new highs and lows are looked. So if you do all history, it will look for all-time highs and all-time lows only, or you can set a specific number of trading days, so I've done here with a year, or a specific number of calendar days, or for example since 1st of January, or since a particular calendar date. The second extremely neat thing is how you can apply filters on any of the columns that you see. Say, for example, you want to see if only shares within the FTSE 350 list that are part of a mining sector. Well, make sure you have a sector column added to your list. You right click on the heading and you'll see each column will have an add column filter option. Click on it, and for the sector column what we have is a full list of all the sectors. Everything is selected by default. What I'll do is I will untick all of them and then just select mining. And now in fact you'll see behind you, you'll see the list of only the mining stocks within the FTSE 350. And you don't have to just show one at a time. I could, for example, show mining and oil and gas producers. So here we go. Click on OK, and to indicate that there's a filter active, the column heading is going to turn to this pinkish color. This button here on your toolbar will allow you to disable any filters on the column. Click it again and the same filter will be enabled. This then allows you to look at things like the price percentage change, sort it by price percentage change, but only within the oil and mining companies. You can, as explained, you can apply a filter to any column. I'll just delete the column filter here. And if you apply a filter to a numerical column, like for example the price percentage change, ShareScope will offer to for you to set a range. So for example, I only want to see shares that have gone up by at least 2% today or in the last day. So I tick minimum value. Minimum value is 2, no maximum value. I click on OK. And here we have it, all of the shares within the FTSE 350 that have gone up by 2% or more. Now you can apply column filters on multiple columns at the same time. So for example, I could go back and add a column filter here and only look at shares that are part of the mining and oil and gas sector that have risen in price by 2% or more. And out of the whole of FTSE 350, 4 shares have appeared. And if I uncheck here, the filter will be disabled. Now, you'll see that these columns still have a sort of pale pink color to them. That's because there's still a filter there which I can reactivate by toggling this option here, or just right clicking and clicking on enable filter column. If you want to remove the filter entirely, delete column filter and it will remove the filter entirely from that column. Now all my column headings are grey, so there's no filter whatsoever applied to this list. Now you can use this for all sorts of things. Say for example you want to quickly look up for any ETF that has the word gold in its name. Well, let's do that. We go to change list, ETFs, funds and bonds, exchange traded funds, and here they are. These are all our ETFs. Now I right click on the name column heading, I click on add column filter, and this is just a text filter. So I want to enter, it says items containing this text will be included in the view. So if I type in gold and click on OK, it will find all the ETFs that have the word gold in their name. And similarly, I can edit this and remove gold and add, for example, silver. Okay, and now here we have it, a list of all the ETFs in ShareScope that have the word silver in their name. Just as before, right click, delete column filter, and it will wipe everything out. Now let's move on to graphs. Graphs are an extremely powerful way of determining if a share is worth investing in or not, and there's a whole host of ways to analyze a graph. If you want to look at what features are available to you, look no further than just right-clicking on the graph. Everything that you can do to a graph will be here. You can change the time frame used, you can add moving averages and edit the background color or the font size. It's all here on the right click. But let me explain some of the basics first. One of the most common thing to do on a chart is, or some want to do, is to zoom. So if you to zoom, all you have to do is click on the chart, hold the mouse button down, drag the mouse left or right in order to highlight a portion of that chart, and then let go. First time you do that, it will pop up with this "Did you know" box, but just don't show this again. And when you're done, it will zoom in to the portion of a chart that you have highlighted. Repeat the process again, and you can go further in to the chart. If you double click, it will zoom out back to what the default setup is for that graph, in this case 1 year. If you double click again, it will zoom out and show you the entire available history for the stock. Now if you want to change the amount of the amount of data that's displayed on a chart from 1 year to say 2 years, you can do this by right clicking on the graph. You're going to limit date range and click on set date range. Click on that and go previous 2 years. OK, and now my default selection is 2 years. So if I go down the list of shares, it will open up a chart for 2 years of data. If I want to turn it back to 1 year, I go back and set it back to 1 year. If you disable the option entirely, the default selection will be the entire history of the stock. But I'll put it back to 1 year because that will make things a little bit clearer. If you want to edit what the graph looks like, all the options for this will be in Graph Design. Click on right click Graph Design, and here is where you set up the actual chart. So first tab you'll see at the top is a price tab. This is where you start the actual main graph, or the actual type of chart. And you can choose to show a clothesline chart or a candlestick chart, Heikin-Ashi candles, point and figure, three line break, etc. We'll keep it on bars. Now you'll have noticed that in my chart all the bars are black, but you can edit the colors of the bars by pressing the button here. You'll see here where it says price color, there's a button below that says single color, because that's my setting now. If I click on it, box will open up showing me the color selections. Now at the moment I have it set to single color, and if I want to change that single color to say blue, I press this colored button, this colored line here, and a color wheel will open up. I can pick a different color, I can pick a different thickness for the line. But single color isn't the only mode I can choose. The first and possibly the most popular is close relative to previous close. With this selection, there are now 3 colors at my disposal: an up color, a down color, and a neutral color. Now, what determines if a particular bar is an up, a down, or a neutral bar is this. So how that particular bar closed compared to the previous closed. So if it closed higher, it's an up bar. If it closed lower, it's a down bar. If it closed the same, it's a neutral bar. And if we hit preview, we can see what these bars look like. And yep, if you find those bars are a little too thin, you want them a little thicker, you can do that as well. And the bars will be drawn a little thicker. The next option down is exactly the same as the close relative to previous close, so it still has an up color, a down color, a neutral color. However, what determines if a bar is an up bar or a down bar isn't how it closed compared to the previous close, but how it closed compared to how it opened. This is important because it can be slightly different. There will be days where the share price closed higher than it opened, but lower than the previous close. So with one option it'll be coloured black, with the other it'll be coloured red. And there are more options here, so you can colour the bars based on volume as well, or by using a swing trading system. But definitely these three are the most commonly used. I'm going to stick to a thin single colour to avoid adding too much to the chart for when I show the other features. The next important bit is a volume tab. You can turn on the volume histogram entirely on and off. Similarly to the bar chart, you can set up colouring modes here and then various colours. And I'm going to use the main price color scheme, so it's going to use whatever scheme I set up on the chart above. So again, single color black. Now this might interest some people, is a signal line. A signal line is just a moving average of the volume. So I'm going to set up a signal line. What I'll do, I'll make it a slightly brighter and thicker color so it's easier to see. And I want to add a moving average calculated over a year. So I'm going to do 252 periods, and I'll set it to simple. And here we have it. So this other option here is it shows how the volume is displayed. So by default it will show you the volume as you expect it, just the number of shares traded on any given period of time. But you could also show the volume as value traded. Value traded, what it does, it will show you the monetary amount. So it will multiply the volume, the number of shares, by the close price to give you a rough idea of exactly how much money exchanged hands on for that share on that day or that period of time. It's not a exact value, because of course all of the trades of the day didn't go through at the close price, but it will give you a good idea if a particular day where there were tens of millions or hundreds of millions of pounds traded on a particular stock. It will give you a good ballpark. The time tab allows you to set the time frame used on the chart, as in the size of the bars. So here we have it set to 1 day. Each bar represents 1 day of trading. I can select 1 week, hit preview, and now the bars are showing me 1 week of trading. So instead of the open, high, low, close and volume of a day, it's the open, the high, the low and the close the volume of any given week. And you can also set some slightly unusual bar sizes, like 3-day bars or 2-week bars. But all the options are here. A dynamic selection of scale. This will allow ShareScope to choose the bar size based upon how much you've zoomed in or zoomed out of a chart. If you have your bars set to 1 day and you zoom out to show 25 years of data, you would not be able to see the individual bars unless you have a gigantic monitor. So ShareScope, if you have it set on dynamic, ShareScope might pick a monthly bar size. So each bar is 1 month of data, or whatever it deems appropriate to based on your monitor size. And if you zoom in, those monthly bars might become then weekly bars and then daily bars, and when you zoom out again, it will return them back to monthly bars. So it will do it automatically for you. If you select any of the other options, it will stay fixed on that period no matter how much you zoom in or zoom out. Lines and text is where you set up various colors and options. So you have, for example, you can change the frame and the title text, fonts and font size and font style. You can also determine how thick the background grid is. So if I set it to the max, I hit preview, you'll see there's a very thick grid on the chart, and if I drag it further down, there'll be a much more sparse grid, and you can play around with the bars here. The most interesting part of the lines and text is the scale. As it's set up now, the two scales, so the left-hand axis and the right-hand axis, are both showing you the price. So you can see what the price was at each given point on the chart. It doesn't have to be that way. I can choose the left-hand scale. I can change it to start at 0%. Now, if I do that, you'll see now on the on the left-hand scale, the instead of showing me the numerical value, the absolute value in pence, I now show it as a percentage. And the way it determines the percentage is at the 0% point, because I set it to start at 0%. 0% point is the leftmost price on the chart. So I can see, for example, that here was approximately just under 18% higher than it was at the beginning of the chart. If you zoom in to the chart, the axis gets recalculated to the new starting point. If you zoom out, and here I can see how much Morrison's, for example, has grown over time. So from the first price in history in ShareScope, we can see that the share price has grown by almost 500% at its highest point. There's also a third option, which is start at 100%. It's exactly the same as start at 0%, but instead of starting at 0 and going positive or negative, it will start at 100% or will just go above 100 or below 100, whatever your preference is. Style tab will allow you to do things like these slightly fancy shaded frames on the background. As you can see, it goes from this pale blue at the top to white at the bottom, and you can disable this entirely if you find it annoying, or change the colors. You can set the watermark, so you can choose what watermarks are being displayed. At the moment I've got the epic code and the price percentage change. I could add the last price as a watermark, and here you can set the colors. And advanced, there's a few extra options, but I'm not going to go into that into a huge amount of detail. The next thing I wanted to show you is the moving average dialog box. I'll show you this because this is definitely the most commonly used technical indicator there is. If you're using ShareScope Gold, you will have up to 4 moving averages that you can add on the chart. At the moment, only one is being displayed. As you can see, there's only one tick in the box. So you see each of these boxes here represents one moving average, and everything in there are the options for that moving average. So at the moment I only have a simple 20 period moving average, and I say period and not day because if you see here, the data comes from the graph time period. So whatever I set on the graph, if I change my graph to a weekly graph, my 20 period moving average will become a 20-week moving average. At the moment it's on a daily chart, so it's a 20-day moving average, but it's 20 of whatever is being shown on the graph. You can choose, you can change, of course, if you want to, simple, exponential, weighted moving average, etc. You can change a period by just typing the number in the box, and you can change the line used by just clicking on the colored line. Make it thicker, make it thinner, change the color, etc. There is a second tick box below which will allow you to add a channel to the moving average. So if I select Bollinger Bands, I can set it to 2 standard deviations, that should do, and I'll keep the same color as a moving average. Hit preview, and here it is. So I still have my 20 period simple moving average with a 2 standard deviation Bollinger Band above and below. If I uncheck that, the Bollinger Band will be ignored. And if I want to then add a second moving average, let's say I want to add a still a 20 period, but this time an exponential moving average, because I want to see how they differ, I can then change a color, do it red, slightly thicker, click on OK, and I can hit preview if I want to keep the dialog box open. I'm happy with that, click on OK, and now the change has been made. And as I said, I haven't added the moving average to Morrison, I have added a moving average to setting 1. So now any share I view using setting 1 will have that same moving average. There are other features. There's trend lines, zigzag lines. There's an events dialog box. Now you're going to find this. You might find this particularly useful. If you click on events, you can display specific events on the chart. It could be news, so it'll show you when news items have come out for that stock. Or things like AGM dates, results announcements, etc. You can show dates for your own purchases and sales, so it will mark on the chart when you bought the share or when you sold the share, so you can easily graphically see how well or how badly you did with your trades. And you can show marks for things like splits and consolidations, directors' dealings, and major shareholders' dealings, etc. You can just tick which ones you want, and they'll be displayed on the chart. The way they're displayed, you can edit by clicking on the button here. So I can change the color of the ex-dividend indicator, and I can choose if the little symbol will be displayed at the bottom of the chart, at the top of the chart, or actually on the chart itself at the closing price. It's up to you. You can display it. There is a section on political and economic data. I can, for example, show who the UK Prime Minister and US President were at the time. So if I do that, I click on OK, and I can see what NMC Health was doing during the Barack Obama era and Donald Trump era, and David Cameron, Theresa May, etc. We have stop losses you can add, indicators, so these will appear below the chart. So you have RSI, MACD, and a whole host of various technical indicators. The way you use them is pretty straightforward. You choose your indicator, click on it, box will open up, allowing you to set the settings. You can change the color of a line, etc. And when you're done, you click on OK, and the indicator will be drawn below the chart. You can then point your mouse arrow at the top, click, drag and let go, click, drag and let go to increase or decrease the size of the chart. If you want to get rid of it, click on the little X here in the corner and the indicator will be removed. The bit that I wanted to focus a bit more on is the lines and text feature. Under lines and text, you will find everything that you can draw on the chart manually. So if you want to draw a line, the very first option here, draw a line. You click on it, then click, drag and let go, and it will draw a line from A to B. The quicker way, instead of going to the menu each time, there's actually a shortcut for drawing a line, and that is using the Shift key. So hold down the Shift key on your keyboard, click, drag and let go. So clicking, dragging and letting go by itself will zoom, but if you do that while holding down the Shift key on your keyboard, it will draw a line. Once you've drawn it, you can click on it again, and then you can drag it around by changing its position, or you can move it up or down by clicking the middle dot. And if you want, this is asked quite often, if you want to drag away a parallel line, hold down the Shift key then click on the middle dot and drag. Hold the mouse button down, so drag away, and it will drag away a perfect copy of the line that you've just drawn. And now we have two lines. Now, lines have a very, very neat little feature which our customers really like, and that is you can set alarms on lines that you draw. So you've drawn your line, and because you found your own support and resistance level, and you like to be notified by ShareScope if the price crosses that line, well, you draw the line, you select it, you right click on it, and you'll see alarm on line. And you can do that for multiple lines. Now I have two alarms on those two lines. If a share price were to cross above the top line or below the bottom line, an alarm will be triggered and you'll be notified. So you can do all your technical analysis, kind of forget about it, and then if nothing happens, then nothing happens, and if something does happen, one of your lines is crossed, then it doesn't matter if you're looking at the chart or not, you're going to be notified of that fact. If you want to get rid of a line, you just select it and hit delete, and that will delete the line and the alarm. If you only want to get rid of the alarm, right click on it and do remove falling alarm from line. Now, if you want to edit the way the line is drawn, double click on the line and a editing box will open up, and you can change all sorts of things about the way the line is displayed. So we can just make this a slightly thicker blue line. And OK, and now I've got a slightly thicker blue line. Now I've changed this. If I draw another line though, it will still be drawn in red. However, if I edit a line, I'm going to change this to my an orange really thick line, and I want all my lines from now on to be drawn this way. Before I click on OK, I tick set as default, then I click on OK, and now all lines I'll draw from this moment onwards will be orange and extremely thick. There are many other options, so you'll find Fibonacci retracements, shapes and GAN boxes, and all sorts of different features here. The other most commonly used is the add text option. So if I click on add text, I click on the chart, I type a bit of text. Okay, so this is. So my little text box will appear, and I can then point my mouse arrow at it, click and drag it around. I can double click on it to change the text, or I can right click on it and go to colors and style to change the font size and the color used by the text box. Select it, hit delete, and it'll get rid of the text box. Now before we move on, there's one more thing that I would like to show you, and that is important, especially when you're drawing lines. Say I want to draw a resistance line that touches these two highs but then continues into the future. I can't, because there's no actual space here at the top. So what you can do is this. If you hit the down arrow key on your keyboard, the scale of a chart will be compressed. So now I have way more space above the top of a graph, so I can now extend my line properly into the future as I wanted to do so. If you use the up arrow key, it will expand. So up and down will expand and compress the graph. If you hold down the shift key and use the up and down arrow keys, it will shift the scale up and down. Don't worry about putting it back to normal. All you have to do, double click on the chart and it will be back to the default setup. Now I wanted to talk about portfolios. Now there are of course loads of lists in the program, but you can build your own. If you go to the select portfolio button, it's that little orange button that you see at the top. If you don't have a button on the toolbar, just hit the F12 key on your keyboard and the same box will open up. So there are many pre-built lists, but you might want to build your own. There's a watch list of things that you're following, and you can do that by opening up this window and hitting new portfolio. I'll give it a name. And I can set a currency. If you're just building a watch list, just a list of shares or stuff that you're interested in, this doesn't really have much of an effect. But if you're going to use this portfolio then to record your purchases and record your sales in that portfolio, then this is the portfolio currency. Now you can record transactions in all sorts of currencies, but then everything will be converted back to the portfolio currency in order to display the totals. It doesn't have to be pounds. You can pick any other any other currency. So if I select Canadian dollars, I can record my purchases and sales in US dollars, British pounds, euros, etc. But my the total value, the total profit of my portfolio will be displayed in Canadian dollars, or whichever currency I pick from here. And as I say, enable multi-currency display. Click this to view each transaction in its own currency, which is what it is by default. Just the totals will be in pounds. And you can add a cash account to the portfolio automatically. Again, this is only important if you are going to record transactions. And this last option will automatically add a toolbar button for this portfolio. We can do that. I'll click on OK. And now you'll see at the bottom I have a direct link for my portfolio. Now I've created a portfolio. I have a completely blank list. It's just a list with no shares in it. Now, how do we add shares to the portfolio? Two ways. One, if you already know what share you want to add to the portfolio, you can just simply right click in the middle of the portfolio and go to Add Share to Portfolio, or alternatively just press Ctrl A on your keyboard and a search box will open up. Then you start typing, make a search just like before, I showed you before. Find the instrument that you want to add, click on OK, and now GlaxoSmithKline is in my portfolio. The other way, you might not know what you want to add to the portfolio. You might be flicking through for FTSE 350 list, looking for interesting shares, and then you suddenly find one and you want to add it to the portfolio. Well, let's go to the list of FTSE 350 stocks now, and let's open up the graph. So I flip down the graph, and I keep on checking, and I can easily use whatever my technical analysis technique is going to be, and suddenly I find a share that I think is interesting, and now I want to add this to the portfolio. All I do, I press Ctrl A on my keyboard, and although no message will pop up because you might need to do this hundreds of times, so a pop-up will be annoying, but if you press Ctrl A, that share has now been added to a portfolio. Now we'll show you, we'll do it for a couple of others. I'll press Ctrl A, and now if we go back to the portfolio, pressing webinar here at the bottom, if you haven't added a toolbar button, by the way, you can just simply go to select a portfolio again, and the portfolio will appear among the all the portfolios in the program. But now all the ones that we clicked Ctrl A on have been added to the portfolio, and Control A works on any screen. I was doing it on a chart, but you could be on a list or you could be on a financial details page. It doesn't matter. Whichever screen you're on, it will add that share to the portfolio. So now we have our list of shares, and we can modify it. They don't have to be shares. You can add you can mix and match funds, indices, currencies. There's no limitation to the size or content or number of portfolios that you have in the program. If there's a share that I made a mistake, I don't want that, you select it, hit delete on your keyboard, and the share will be removed from your portfolio. And if this were a watch list, that will be the end of it. You now have your own list, and you can look through, you can add and remove stuff from it at a will. But if this were a portfolio that you've created, because this is, you want to keep track of your investments, and you want to record your purchase and sales, you can now start recording transactions against the shares that you have added to the portfolio. To do so, quite straightforward, you select the share you want to purchase, you right click, and you select buy. You enter the details of your transaction, and I'm going to set a date back in 2015, and back in 2015 there we go, I bought 845 shares, and I had a £25 broker charge, and so I'm not going to type in a stamp duty, but you can put stamp duty and contract levy, and I click on OK. And now ShareScope has opened up the transaction screen of the portfolio. You'll see there's the first row will give me the details of of my purchase, so it'll give me how many shares I bought and the price, etc. The second row is the summary line of for Glaxo. which will give me the totals, because of course now I've only got one buy, so the buy and the summary line are basically identical, but I could have several buys, different sells, and the latest line will show me what my current situation for Glaxo is, how many shares I currently own, how much profit I'm making, etc. And the last line is just the grand total for the whole portfolio. And there's also a little summary here at the top. You can see the value of my portfolio, how much value has changed over the last day, how much profit I'm making, etc. If you want to return to your main portfolio screen, you can just click on a portfolio, select it again, and it'll open up the main screen of a portfolio. So as you notice, the portfolio is divided up into two screens. There's a main portfolio screen, which is nothing more than a list of shares, a list that you curate. But a portfolio also has a transaction screen, which will display all of the transactions for that particular share or that particular portfolio. The easiest way to toggle between the two, I find, is to use a keyboard. The plus key on your keyboard will open up the transaction screen for your portfolio, and the minus key will open up the main portfolio list, and you can just press a 2 to toggle between it. If you press the plus key multiple times, you'll see it will toggle between showing you all of the transactions. In this case it's just one, there's only one purchased, or only showing you the summary lines. This is particularly useful if you have a very large portfolio with hundreds and hundreds of transactions. And this way instead it will show you all of the transactions, so just a summary line. You can then record a cell, and to do that, again, you select the share in question, you select sell, and it works exactly the same way. I can record transaction and say I sold them yesterday, and I didn't sell them all. I say I only sold, say, 600 of them. Click on OK. And now I can see further details. So I can see the details of my purchase, the details of my sale, and now what my current situation is. So I can see what my current 200 shares are currently worth, how much profit I've made, again on Glaxo, how much realized profit, that is profit that I've actually pocketed, in this case by selling the shares, or unrealized profit, which is potential profit. It's profit that I could make if I sold all the shares at the current price, but like this number could go up or down depending on how the share price goes. Now, one last thing about portfolios is dividends. Now, if you start using ShareScope and you have a portfolio, your actual real trading portfolio goes back years, and you would like to add all that information into ShareScope, you don't have to worry about the dividend side. You just worry about recording the details of your purchases and your sales. After you've done all that, you can run the automatic dividend recording system in ShareScope. Because as long as you've recorded your purchases and sales correctly, ShareScope will then know if you are entitled to certain dividends, and so it can automatically add those dividends to the portfolio for you. And the way you do it is you record all your buys and all your sells. When you're done, you right click in the middle of a transaction screen and you'll see an option called show latest dividends. Click on it and a box will open up. There'll be a button here at the bottom, select date, and you'll ask ShareScope to go back to a certain date in the past to check for dividends. I set that to 2010, which is way earlier than the date of my first purchase there for Glaxo. I click on OK, and it's going to run against all of the shares, all of the portfolios, looking for any missing dividends. And it's found a whole bunch of Glaxo dividends have not been paid, have not been recorded in the portfolio, plus another one for the example portfolio that comes loaded in ShareScope. I'm not interested in that, so I'm going to uncheck that. Everything else I'll leave ticked. When I do that, I click on OK, and all the dividends will be added to the portfolio automatically, so I don't have to worry about that. If you've already recorded the dividends manually for whatever reason, so you've recorded the dividend transaction against a given share on a given date, ShareScope, as long as you've recorded against the correct date and you've recorded against the pay date of the dividend, then ShareScope will run through, see that there's already a dividend on the pay date, and so it will not it won't double your dividends. Once you have retroactively recorded all your dividends, then ShareScope from this moment onwards will automatically offer to add dividends whenever you open up the program. So you open up the program, it will check back to the last time that you used ShareScope, and all the dividends that were paid out since that time will be ShareScope will offer to for you. Offer to add them to your various portfolios. You can, if you're not interested in recording dividends, you can disable that option. Tools at the top here, options, and go to the portfolios and transactions tab. Offer to add new dividends to portfolios after update. If you don't want that, uncheck this, click on OK, and ShareScope will no longer pester you to add dividends to your portfolio. There are just one last bit that I would like to show you before we conclude this tutorial, and those are shortcut keys. Now, there are many shortcut keys that allow you to quickly display information about a particular company. The / key on your keyboard, that's the one to the left of the letter Z, will open up the news window for that particular stock. Press the same button again, it will return you to the previous screen. The / key on your keyboard, that's the one where the question mark key is, question mark symbol is, will open up the price list for the share. This will allow you to check against for a price against any point in the share's history. So you can see the open, high, low, close, and change and volume for any day in the history of the share. And the full stop key, that will display the director's dealings page for the selected stock. So if you're checking, if you want to check which directors have bought how many shares and when, you can do this on the director's dealings page. So again, full stop to open up the director's dealings page, full stop again to return you to the previous list. There are lots of various keyboard shortcuts, and it will be very useful if you learn them. You will find out that navigating around ShareScope will become a lot quicker. You kind of have left hand on the keyboard, right hand on the mouse, and it will make navigating through the program much smoother instead of constantly using menus. If you want to know the full list of shortcuts, you can find them by going to Help, Contents and Search. That will open up the Help window, and under Index type in keyboard, and you'll see there's keyboard accelerators and system accelerators, and you'll see a list of all the keyboard shortcuts that you can use. And you can also set your own. So if you want, if there are functions that you use all the time, you can then associate a specific keyboard shortcut to that function. Again, go to the Keyboard Accelerators help page for an explanation of how to do that. For now, this is going to conclude then the webinar, and we will be running several more of these at a later date, as we're still experimenting a bit with a format, so the content might change. We'll notify you when the next one is running. But in the meantime, thank you very much for listening, and goodbye.